Good afternoon, everybody. Aaron Keller here at the Law and Crime Network. As jurors are taking an afternoon break in the George Burch murder trial, this is critical testimony. The defendant on the stand walking jurors through the defendant's version of the story of how this young mother met her end. This is amazing testimony. There is a fierce debate going on among all of you, and I'm sure among all of us, and certainly in the minds of the jurors, as to whether or not to believe this defendant, that the young mother's boyfriend was ordering him to take all of these acts after the defendant just claimed that the boyfriend was the one who actually killed Nicole Vanderhayden, the young mother in Green Bay, who was found dead. Now, keep in mind, police originally arrested the boyfriend, but then let him go when they came to suspect this defendant, George Burch. We're going to continue to analyze this case as we wait for live testimony to resume. Adam Sostrin is an attorney who joins us regularly here on the Law and Crime Network. Adam, I just have to ask, what do you make of this?
Well, obviously you're going to have Mr. Burch testify to these things for him to put on this type of a defense. So I'm not surprised at all that we're hearing from him. I understood that this was going to be his defense prior to the trial, and I just wouldn't expect anything less.
I couldn't hear what you said there, Adam. I think I might be able to now. I think the audience did, but I couldn't. So just to kind of continue on with things, what do we make of this guy's demeanor? Is he coming across as a believable witness or not? I know at one point he kind of gave a quick look over to the jurors, that a lot of people said might have been a shifty look, but courtroom procedure is different in every courtroom.
Sure.
And in this courtroom, there is a rule in effect that the attorneys have to stay at the counsel table when they're questioning witnesses. So in a lot of courtrooms, the trial advocacy professors ringing in the back of my head would say, look,
yeah,
you get up and sort of stand behind the jury so that the witness is sort of talking at the jury on direct examination. Here, the attorneys have to stay anchored to the table. So, some of that might change the demeanor of the witness from what we would see in other cases, but you still don't believe this guy at all.
Well, it's a tough story. It's a tough story to sell. The mere fact that he, maybe that he looked over at some of the jurors, sure, a defendant can do that any time that there's a case. And of course, judges can have orders they can put into place with respect to what the defense attorneys are supposed to do. Oftentimes when I'm in trial, I just sit right there at counsel table and I ask away. And I find it to be just as effective as if I were standing up. But what I was saying earlier was the fact that I don't expect anything less from the defendant here, because we always understood that this would be the defense that would be presented. And there's no other way, really, that this defense could be successfully brought without having the testimony from the defendant himself. So all this to be expected today, Aaron.
All of the detail, okay, though, all of the detail. Is this a guy who's filling in blanks, just trying to make the story believable, or is this a guy who's telling a believable story? I know a lot of people are saying, oh, give me a break. This could not have gone on this way. This doesn't make any sense. Sure. But when you start to examine the boyfriend story, there are a lot of gaps in the boyfriend story, and I get that he's not on trial, but, what's up with the fact that he claims he does not have a handgun or a gun that he can conceal, but he has a concealed carry permit? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And, so you got these issues with the boyfriend's version of events as well. Both of them are sitting on the stand, cold as a cucumber. There's no emotion or very little emotion. So I don't know.
It sounds like the victim chose the wrong people to be with. It's always hard to tell. The issue is, can they sell it or not to a jury? How many people can they sell this story to? Perhaps it's not that believable, but, boyfriend made some statements that don't make a whole lot of sense. One of them being that she hit her head. Of course,
that's the other one.
That's the other one. I'd like to hear the context of that. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when that statement was made, in the earshot of the babysitter, to say, oh, I don't know, she hit her head or something. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, or maybe it means a whole lot. We just don't know, and that's what reasonable doubt is all about, Aaron.
You know, you got the comment from the boyfriend that she hit her head, and you've also got the comment from the boyfriend that she wanted to walk home from the bars that night. Well, look, and keep in mind, Adam, you know this, and I think many people in the audience know this. I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin for nearly 3 years, and so did Rachel Stockman, our editor-in-chief. We both worked together there more than 10 years ago. You know, here's the thing. Where these bars were is 9 miles away from where this victim lived with the boyfriend. Then the boyfriend says she was going to walk home. That required walking all the way through the industrial section of Green Bay. Okay, not a residential. She would have had to walk across the river. And, you know, this would have been 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. It would have been a 9-mile walk. That doesn't make sense either, but that's apparently what the boyfriend said.
It doesn't. None of it makes sense, and that's the reason why the boyfriend was in custody for the initial 18 or 21 days.
Okay, we're going to review some of the previous testimony that we just listened to moments ago from George Burch. This is a clip where he's talking about, and again, folks, it's graphic, but we need to review it. This is where he's talking about this sex act being consensual. And a lot of people are saying this is just a story that he made up to try to, you know, give a sense of why his DNA was all over the victim.
So I guess just to describe that towards us, I mean, or for us, we weren't there. I mean, what were you perceiving as you were waking up?
At first, I didn't know what was going on. I looked down and I'm laying on the ground and my pants are around my ankles, literally. And I was a little groggy, trying to, you know, kind of put two together, what the hell was going on.
So you noticed that your pants were still down around your ankles?
Right, which was the first thing that made me wonder what in the world was going on.
You made a head movement, like you were kind of looking around?
Right, looking around to see, try to get my bearings. Didn't know where I was. Wasn't familiar at all with the surroundings around me.
Did you stand up right away?
No, not at first.
What happened at first?
I kind of grabbed my pants and went to kind of move, and that's when I pretty much noticed something was going on behind me.
What do you mean? What did you notice?
Eventually I realized it was a person standing behind me.
Walk us through that from you're coming to, you're scooting forward to pull up your pants, and you realize there was a person behind you. I guess, can you break that down further for us?
What do you mean?
When you were pulling up your pants, did you immediately look behind you, or I guess what caused you to look behind you?
I felt something behind me, something kind of, I wouldn't say hit me, but nudged me. It made me aware that I was not the only person there.
And you were still kind of gathering your senses at this point?
Yes, sir. It was kind of, I don't want to say groggy, but kind of hazy, I guess, a little bit, kind of still at the point where I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know the environment. I don't know how I get to this point. I don't just naturally wake up with my pants around my ankles normally.
Did you hear anything?
The first thing I heard was, don't even fucking think about it. It was the first things I ever heard, the first words I heard.
What'd you do when you heard those words?
I didn't know what to do. Kind of stilled for a second, and that's the main part when I definitely noticed there was, like I said, there was someone standing right behind me. Kind of tried to gather myself together as much as I possibly could.
Did you turn around at that point?
Somewhat. I looked like over my shoulder.
Previous testimony from the defendant, George Burch. He's facing first-degree intentional homicide charges in Green Bay, Wisconsin, related to the death of a young mother named Nicole Vanderhayden. Adam Sostrin remains on the line with us. Adam, again,
Yep.
The amount of detail that this defendant went through, again, this is his version of the story. The jury's got to weigh whether or not he's telling the truth or not, but he's saying, okay, there was a series of consensual sex acts. He wakes up laying in the grass, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he realizes that there's a guy standing behind him with a gun, okay? And then he eventually realizes that it's the boyfriend, and he claims that the boyfriend said, "Look what you made me do," and then eventually walks over and sees the victim laying dead on the pavement. Now, keep in mind, there was blood found in this area. So there's some forensic evidence that either he has to try to explain or that the forensic evidence backs up his story, depending on whether or not you believe him. But ultimately, that's where he said everything started to fall apart.
Yeah, how many times do you hear such fascinating defenses? It's definitely it's an alternate theory that the defense is bringing up in front of the jurors. Look, he's got problems. It's not airtight. Of course, he didn't have those any kind of facial injury, which would support the fact that he had been knocked out so bad, at least, that he was knocked out through a person being murdered nearby. These are tough things for the jurors to sort of equate and make sense of.
Yes. And one thing that we don't pick up here is we don't pick up on the tone in the courtroom. We can see the defendant's body language, but sometimes courtrooms feel a lot heavier than they look on television. Sometimes jurors' demeanors rub off on other jurors. And from what we heard from one of our producers who's in the courtroom, John Burton, with whom I worked many years ago,
Right.
Apparently it's the same characters when we're talking about a case in Green Bay, Wisconsin. A few things change. He said that the jury's been pretty stoic. They've been listening very intently, not really reacting too much. So members of the jury aren't showing their cards, not showing their thoughts very much.
Right, and that's always a scary thing for both sides. You just never know. You have no idea. No idea what they're thinking, no idea what they're talking about, what they shouldn't be talking about during breaks. They had to hear from this guy. They've probably been waiting to hear from him through the entire state's case, and now the defense is putting on this evidence, and they have to soak it up. They have to hear every single detail to see if there is something plausible there.
Critical testimony this afternoon with the defendant, George Burch, on the stand, saying that the victim's boyfriend made him hide the body after the boyfriend killed the victim. Let's continue reviewing some of his testimony now.
See anything?
I saw what looked like a man standing with a firearm in his hand.
What exactly did you see, as far as you can remember?
It was fairly dark. I saw someone that looked like a hooded sweatshirt. Couldn't really see any faces, just glimpse. Standing behind me, it looked like it was like in this direction, and which appeared to be a firearm in his hand.
On the record, that's to reflect that. Mr. Burch, you were pointing down at a little bit of an angle and holding your hand. What are you referring to?
Like a firearm in his hand pointing in my direction, directly behind me.
I think the record has been made. Go ahead.
So you're coming to, you turned around, you heard what you heard, and that's what you saw?
Yes, sir.
What kind of firearm?
It was a handgun. What kind? I couldn't tell you. It was a darker handgun. It wasn't like chrome or anything like that. It wasn't shiny.
And you were just describing for the record where that was pointing. Was it pointing at you?
In my direction, yes, sir.
So it's not like it was pressed up against your forehead?
No, it was behind me.
As you turn around and see this, I guess, could you tell if it was a man or a woman at that point?
From the voice, from the rough outline of the person behind me from what I could tell. I perceived it to be a
More
man.
testimony from just a short while ago from defendant George Burch. He's faced the jury to try to keep himself out of prison on a life sentence if convicted on first-degree intentional homicide charges in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Adam Sostrin remains with us here on the Law and Crime Network. It looks like the jury perhaps might be getting very close to heading back into the room. This was about a 15-minute break. It started about 15 minutes ago, a mid-afternoon break in that case. So one thing that's interesting here that I'm waiting to hear after the break is exactly how this defendant tries to uncouple himself from the boyfriend, because he says the boyfriend went with him and showed him where the boyfriend wanted him to hide the body or dispose of the body, dump off the body. You know, here's the thing. The body was dumped off not far from where the boyfriend lived with the victim. So, you know, again, it's one of these strange things that either it was by design, if you want to convict George Burch, or it fits in with George Burch's story, because, you know, how is he going to answer the question of how the boyfriend uncoupled from him? Was this done on purpose so that he could say that the boyfriend wanted to walk back home? We may have lost Adam. I'm not sure if he is still fully with us on the line. We're going to try to get his sound back in a second. But ultimately here, we've got a big question. We've got the defendant on the witness stand saying, hey, look, the boyfriend jumped in the car along with a body presumed to be dead and went to a location not terribly far away. It's less than about a 3-4 minute drive, if memory serves me properly, because I've driven on many of these roads when I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin, at least the main roads in these neighborhoods. They're major trunk roads on the southeast side of town. We're going to try to bring Adam back here, and we're waiting with bated breath to see exactly how the defendant talks about how the boyfriend left this scene, in his words. In the meantime, let's continue reviewing the previous testimony.
Yes, sir.
And the record reflect that Mr. Burch turned in the direction of about 7 or 8 o'clock in terms of where the person was in reference to him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. 7 or 8 o'clock, does that mean, I guess, where's that person standing, in the road or in the grass?
They're in the grass area behind me.
What happened next?
Pretty much, I finished roughly gathering myself. I pulled my pants up. Was kind of still trying to pretty much gather myself to figure out, like, what were my options here? What do I have to do? Then I was instructed to move to the back end of the vehicle.
What do you mean?
I was told to pretty much don't think about doing anything stupid and move myself to the back of where the Blazer was, to the rear of the Blazer.
By the time you were told to move towards the back of the Blazer, had you had a chance to take in your surroundings?
Pretty much so. The close immediate area.
What do you mean when you said you were considering or thinking about your options?
If there was any way I could remove myself from this situation, to be completely honest, if there's anything I could do to get out of harm's way.
What types of things did you consider?
Running, screaming, trying to attack the person that had the firearm.
All right, Adam Sostrin is back on the line with us here at Law and Crime. Adam, you have the right to remain silent in court when you're a defendant, but when you're joining us, you don't have that right. So
I don't have that
we
right.
will be able to hear you yet again. So look, a lot of people are sitting there saying, okay, this guy's story makes sense with the physical evidence. A lot of people are saying he is concocting a story to coincide with the physical evidence. The jurors are just going to have to go back to those old human nature instincts as to whether or not this guy's telling the truth or whether he's not. It's why we have a confrontation clause in the Constitution. Witness has got to sit there and talk in front of a jury, and then 12 people decide whether it's the truth or whether it's a lie.
That's true. As Bill Clinton would say in his heart of hearts, in my heart of heart, I sort of believe that this story is, in a way, it sounds like it's concocted to fit with the evidence. And of course, it becomes up to the jurors. But it's more than that. It's, the failure of the boyfriend to give really coherent, adequate testimony that makes sense. That's a little bit more believable. And because of that, jurors may say, well, there's reasonable doubt. I could see this as being a hang. Real hard to see this as being a not guilty. I could see it as a hang and a retrial.
It could be. We'll have to wait and see. And the other thing is lesser includeds might play a role here. If I were in the defense chair, I wouldn't want lesser includeds here because it might mean jurors could find grounds to compromise and still convict.
Well, I hate the lesser includeds. Unfortunately, it's, the district attorney and the judge will talk about them at the end of the trial, and they're just going to naturally come up. And those things naturally lead to convictions. No defense attorney wants the lesser included, so we do not want those.
Yeah, so here the defense can turn around and say, okay, look, you've got either the big charge or you've got to acquit, nothing in the middle. Looks like we're getting ready to come back and do live testimony, hopefully in very short order here on the Law&Crime Network. Again, defendant George Burch expected to resume his testimony any moment in a Green Bay courtroom. He took the stand basically to point the finger at the victim's boyfriend. So we're waiting for testimony to resume. It looks like the judge is back on the bench. It looks like the defendant just about to sit down. Let's listen in. Testimony is going to pick up any second, it looks like.
Okay.
As we've had throughout the day, Mr. Burch is still on the stand. Mr. Burch, you're still under oath. And Attorney Stebbins is still in his direct examination. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. George, we left off, I guess, when you were at the field that we now know as Hoffman Avenue. So let's just pick up where we left off. Essentially, at some point you said you could no longer carry Nicole, and her legs, I guess, went down to the ground.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry.
And at that point, you were then, I guess, pulling her by her armpits.
Like I said, I was pretty much in the vicinity of where I was told to go with her at the time. So when I dropped her, I didn't do much moving after that.
And what made you think you were getting into the vicinity where she was supposed to be?
I went to the area where I had been told to go, and he had stopped in front of me in the area, so I was facing him. He was 5 feet roughly, not exact, but he was about 5 feet away from me, 6 feet away from me roughly. And he was in front of me. I'd say he was at 1 o'clock.
So keep walking us through that. What happened next?
Pretty much I was advised to put her down. At this time he was kind of like looking around motion, kind of, I don't know if he was taking in, if he heard something or if he was looking like around just to take in what was going on around him, or looking to see if, I don't know if somebody could see us or what was going on at that time. But that was the motion that he was making at the time.
What happened next?
He was in the vicinity of me, and the whole time I'm trying to figure out a way to remove myself from the situation or get out of this situation, or what I can do to do it. When I noticed, because up until this time, he had been either in a direction where I could not face him or get to him, or he was far enough away from me but he was constantly watching me the whole time, or constantly paying attention on my movements and what I was doing. At this time, when I seen him kind of look away or not pay direct attention to me, was when I kind of went like this to draw his attention more to what was going on than to me. And when I did, Nicole kind of flipped over like this way. Her feet were more ahead of her, and flipped over. And when he kind of paid attention to what was going on at that time, that's when I turned, and with everything I had, I lunged at him and pushed him as hard as I possibly could at that time.
Did he fall down?
I don't know. He stumbled backwards. Did he fall down? I don't know, because I broke for it.
What'd you do?
Hauled ass to my car, or my truck.
How far were you from it?
I'd say 10, 15 feet maybe give or take a little bit.
The truth is that before May 21st of 2016, you never met Nicole Vanderheiden, correct?
20th to 21st, yes, sir.
The first time you ever saw her was when you observed her in that bar that night at Richard Cranium's, correct?
Yes, sir.
The truth is that you were attracted to Nikki from the moment you saw her, right?
I thought she was attractive, yes, sir.
When did you decide that you were going to have sex with her?
Later on, after we had hung out together, and we had both expressed we were into each other.
Is that when you went to your home, you were going to have sex with her when you got there?
I hoped so.
When you left your home, did you bring a condom with you?
I think I did, but I don't recall.
You drove Nikki home that night, right? That's the truth.
Yes, sir.
You drove her to an area that you'd never been to, that you were not familiar with at all, correct?
Yes, sir.
You drove her down Broadway, you crossed the bridge into Pier, correct?
I believe so. I'm not familiar with the area, but if you say so.
And you drove down Highway G past a bunch of businesses, past some residential areas.
I guess so, sir. I was more interested in talking to her in the conversations we were having. But if you say there's businesses there, I'm sure there is.
Well, to be fair, Mr. Burch, not only did you drive her that night, but you're also familiar with all the maps in this case, with the location, with all the discovery that was provided. You know where that location is now, right?
I couldn't go there right now if you told me you freed me from this charge if I could find it.
You drove Nicole out in front of her house, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's the truth. You parked there, out in front of Berkeley Road, correct?
Yes, sir.
You had every intention of having sex with Nicole that night, correct?
I was hoping that was the way it was going. That's the way it seemed like it was leading. Yes, sir.
Did Nicole tell you that she had a young baby at home, that she was a nursing mother?
I believe she had said something about it. The nursing part, I'm not sure. I do believe she said she had a child because she had mentioned to me that she had a babysitter.
I thought she told you that the kids were out of town with their dad.
I said those two, but I also said when we got there, the light was on. She said the babysitter was up.
Why would that be a problem? Why wouldn't you just ask the babysitter to go home and go inside?
Sir, I don't know. I've never been in her house. I don't know her babysitter.
So Nicole would rather have sex with you in front of her neighbor's home with your butt hanging out the door of the car than ask the babysitter to go home?
Sir, I don't know. I wasn't the one making decisions.
You mentioned that you started fooling around with Nikki, correct?
Yes, sir.
At some point her shirt came off, right?
Yes, sir.
She had on two shirts, right? A tank top and an overshirt?
I believe so. I'm not exactly sure.
But they were both completely off at some point, right?
Yes, sir.
Were you touching her breasts?
A little bit.
Did you note that they were engorged?
I noticed they were big. Engorged, I wouldn't say. I'd never seen them before, so I wasn't sure exactly what they were supposed to look like.
She hadn't nursed in 7 hours.
I don't know that.
Was there actual breast milk in her breast?
I don't remember seeing any. In her breast, I couldn't tell you. I don't remember physically seeing any. I didn't spend a long time in her breast area.
Did she tell you that she was uncomfortable?
Not that I recall, sir.
That they were sore when you touched her?
Not that I recall.
You started out with Nicole fooling around in the front seat of the car, right?
Yes, sir.
Is the dome light on or off at that time?
I don't believe the dome light worked, but I don't recall it.
It's convenient. You said that all of the windows to the vehicle were open.
Yes, sir.
And when did all of the windows get opened?
I believe they were open when I was driving because it's a nice day. It was probably in the 70s or 80s that day, roughly. So I like to drive with the windows down whenever
Open.
I have a chance.
Back, front, all the way open.
They go down predominantly all the way down their back. Yes, sir.
Both were open all the way in the front.
I believe they were all the way down.
After you are making out with Nicole in the front seat, you at some point moved to the back seat of the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you walk around to the passenger side of the vehicle to the back seat, is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
And you don't remember how Nicole got into the back seat?
I don't remember if she got out and got into the back or if she just climbed over the center console and got into the back. There's no way I could climb to the back
Why'd you walk around to the passenger side?
because I'm big and I wouldn't fit that easily behind the driver's seat.
So the driver's seat had been pushed all the way back?
I don't know if it was all the way back, but I can barely fit in the car as it is, and if it had been moved at all, I wouldn't be able to fit back there.
But Doug fit back there just fine.
I believe so. I'm just fine. I don't know. You'd have to ask him about that.
You said that you were having sexual intercourse with Nicole while she was in the backseat of that car, right?
Eventually, yes, sir.
And what did she tell you about how painful it was?
She didn't express that she was in any pain at all.
You were here through Dr. Rogalska's testimony about the contusions and abrasions on her mons pubis, right?
Yes, sir.
About the contusions on the vestibule, her urethral orifice, those contusions. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
The contusions on her lower vaginal vault, you remember that, right?
Yes, sir.
Blood in her vaginal vault, you remember that?
I believe so.
Deep, soft tissue contusions to her mons pubis and abrasions to her left breast. You heard the doctor explain those injuries and explain that they would be painful injuries, even if they were consensual. You heard that, right?
I believe that's what she said, but I'm not sure.
Caused by penetration. Caused by penetration.
Correct.
And that was part of your not gentle sexual activity that you had with her, right?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
That was all a result of your not gentle sexual activity that you had with her?
If that's the way you would put it, yes, sir.
I think that's the way you put it.
It wasn't gentle, no.
It was painful.
That I don't know.
Painful because it wasn't consensual, right?
No, sir, that's not true.
What really happened was you drove Nicole home 20 miles away from where you lived, fully expecting that you were going to have sex, right? That was your expectation. You were going to have sex. That's why you're driving her home, right?
I was hoping that we would. It was leading from what had happened before and where we had spoken. It seemed like that's what was going to happen.
And when you get there and it becomes clear that Nikki isn't going to have sex with you, when she attempts to go into her house and leave your vehicle, that's when your mood changes, right?
No, sir.
That's when things get aggressive, don't they?
Not at all.
That's when you grab that cord and strangle her, don't you?
No, sir, not at all.
That's when Nikki gets slammed on the ground repeatedly when she's trying to run toward her house, when those bloodstains lead in a direction back to her home.
None of that is true.
Well, how do you know? You were out cold when Nikki was assaulted.
Because you said I did it.
Nikki was strangled. She had a fractured jaw, correct?
I don't know, sir. That's what the medical examiner said. But I can't speak for sir. I'm not a doctor.
You heard all of that, right?
Yes, sir.
You saw her injuries. You sat through court to see the defensive injuries to her hands, to her feet, to her palms, to her fingernails, that she fought for her life, right?
According to what the doctor said, yes.
And you were just out cold during all of this?
Yes, sir.
And you say that Doug Dietrich did this, but of course, you didn't see that happen either, did you?
I cannot say for certain, no.
And you'll have the jury believe that Doug Dietrich sat there and did all of these things to his girlfriend while you were just out cold on the lawn hanging out.
I wasn't hanging out. I had been knocked out from behind, sir, when I didn't know anyone was behind me.
Actually, you didn't say you were knocked out from behind. You didn't remember what happened. You were having sex, and the next thing you knew, you woke up on the ground, right?
It made me lead me to believe that I had been knocked out because I didn't pass out from standing there.
But you don't recall any pain, so how do you know?
I didn't recall any pain until later on that day when I got out of the situation and was not completely all worked up.
And then you only recall just maybe a small little bump on the back of your head.
I remember being painful in the back of my head.
Not even a bump. Because Ed Jackson would have seen that.
I'm 6'7", so it's hard for someone to see the top of my head.
When they're sitting on a boat within 10 feet from you all afternoon?
That I don't know, sir, what he saw.
You never met Doug Dietrich before that night, right?
No, sir.
So rather than just beating you or killing you in the middle of the street, he decided to enlist you, a total stranger, to help him dispose of the body of his girlfriend.
I don't know what his plans were.
He had you drive them to a remote location, correct?
Yes, sir.
He thought it would be a good idea to have a complete stranger know where he's dumping a body?
I don't know what he thought. You'd have to ask Mr. Dietrich about that.
And you described taking Nicole's body. You're the one who carried her body to her final resting place, did you not?
If that was her final resting place, yes, sir.
You dragged her into that field. You dumped her on the ground, right?
I didn't drag her anywhere.
You said your fireman's carried?
I said I picked her up and carried her over there, and at the end, I had dropped her feet. I didn't say anything about dragging her.
You didn't say anything about dropping her feet. You said you had her by the arms. Which is it?
My exact story, if you would go back and look, was that I picked her up, carried her out of the car over to the position of roughly where it was, and let her go and had my arms under her towards the end.
And then you dropped her feet and you're carrying her?
I didn't go any farther. I said that already, sir.
You stopped right there.
Roughly, we didn't go much farther than anywhere, right there.
How far down the embankment were you?
We were at the descend, so I don't know how far that goes down. I'd never been there before, so I couldn't tell you exactly how far I was down there, and it was dark.
You were down the embankment?
We were not at the bottom, no. It was still inclined.
And Doug was coming down the embankment with you?
He was standing in front of me as I was looking that direction. He was in front of me in the incline like this. He was not ahead of me. He was like right in front of me.
The record should reflect that the witness had one hand out and the other hand directly in front of him.
I would say
His other hand, is that
1
correct?
o'clock roughly, sir. 1 o'clock in front of me, yes, sir.
So just so we have a record, go ahead.
So clear this up for me. You're backing down the embankment with Nicole's body in a fireman's carry position, right?
No.
What are you doing?
I told you before, and I will say it one more time for you, sir. I was carrying her over to this area. When I got to the final position, I let her legs go because I could barely carry her because it was all like going off and on, like it was kind of hard to manage carrying her without losing my balance. That is when I let her go, and I was still bracing her with this arm, and I ended up putting both my arms under her shoulders. Douglas Dietrich was standing in front of me at this time.
Looking right at you, just like you're looking
1
right
o'clock
at me.
roughly, yes, sir.
Is he closer to their knee?
And is Doug higher or lower than you in terms of the ground?
I am not sure. We were roughly on the plane of going
So
down.
you're standing sideways on the embankment?
1 foot was higher than the other, yes, sir. Because we were facing this way parallel, and the embankment goes this way, so we were standing in front at the embankment. He wasn't down it, and I wasn't up it, and vice versa. We were parallel, I guess you would say, to the embankment.
He decided that rather than letting you carry Nikki to her final spot, he was going to follow you down there?
I believe so, sir. I don't know what he decided on doing.
And you lunged at him uphill and you pushed him to the ground?
We were on the same plane again, sir. I didn't lunge uphill at anyone.
You lunged and you shoved him,
Yes, sir.
and you ran,
Yes, sir.
just like in the movies, right?
I don't know what movie you're referring to, sir.
I don't know, you referred to the movies before when you were talking about how in the movies they put the
How
seatbelt
you,
on and they
how you try to think of ways to get out of a situation.
That's what you're doing now, aren't you?
No, sir, at all.
Objection, this is getting a little argumentative.
Sustained, it's argumentative. Go ahead.
You testified earlier that you realized only after a period of time that you had pulled that lever too far and put the vehicle into a lower gear, right?
Yes, sir.
When did you realize that?
When I was trying to drive off the dirt road into the main road, roughly,
So while you were in the dirt road, you were going pretty slow?
I don't know how fast I was going. I wouldn't say it was slow, but I wasn't going as high rate of speed. No, sir.
Possible that you realized that you had lowered the car into too low of a gear only after you saw that the state provided to you. You traveled 82 feet in 15 seconds.
I do not know how far I traveled, sir.
82 feet in 15 seconds. What is that? 5 miles an hour?
I don't know.
Just cruising slowly out of that field, right? 'Cause you're not in a hurry.
Briefly.
Come up.
A sidebar here, Adam. The prosecutor's really going at this guy, and he's firing right back at the prosecutor. Part of me is wondering if, there's going to be a little scolding session going on right now that the prosecutor is being argumentative.
Well, yeah, you saw the objection and the court sustain that objection. This happens. Basically, the prosecution is trying to tell a story. The defendant's going to say, no, it didn't happen this way. And then the prosecutor is allowed to go, well, isn't it true that this is what happened? They can ask as many leading questions as they want. Sometimes they're a little offensive to the defense. And so the defense has the right to sustain, have that objection sustained, that you can't do those kind of things to the defendant while testifying. But he's sticking to his guns. He's trying to tell his story. I'm sure the defendant spent oodles and oodles of time with his defense attorney figuring out how to handle each and every one of these questions. It sort of was interesting to see the defense attorney raise issues that the prosecution wouldn't be able to raise them. For instance, bringing up prior convictions, because of course the prosecutor is going to want to bring up things like that. So you want to get out ahead of these things. That's what you do in these cases to mitigate damage. That's exactly what happened here. And
It looks like we're going back into testimony, Adam. So let's listen back in.
Okay.
Another sidebar here, Adam. We are listening to some pretty contentious testimony back and forth between the defendant and the prosecutor here. And, look, it seems like this guy is sticking to his guns on the stand. And I don't really know what traction the prosecutor is getting other than coming across as looking combative here.
Well, these things happen, Aaron. He's trying to make, he's trying to make the defendant look a little foolish. He's gotten the points that he wanted to raise. Of course, who after an event just goes fishing, of course, doesn't convey to his very good friend.
Sidebar about the next line of questioning, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to go back to testimony, though, Adam. Hang on that thought.
So you said before that had this been a struggle and you had observed it, you would have done everything that you could have to help out, right?
If there was anything I could do, yes, sir.
You could have reported it to the police, right?
You asked me about the struggle when it was happening, sir.
So you'd report a struggle, but not dumping a body in a field.
That's not what I'm talking about, sir.
When you pulled up on the house at Berkeley Road, you said you pulled up in the area where roughly we showed it on the map, right? So it was before the Peterson house or just before the Peterson house on the right side of the road?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
You said Nikki advised you to pull up there.
Yes, sir, I'd never been in the area. I didn't know the area.
She didn't tell you to go to the driveway?
No, sir.
She didn't invite you in her home?
No, sir.
That's because she didn't want you in her home, right?
I don't know, sir, if that would be the case.
She didn't want to be with you at all after she got out of you the ride home, right?
That is not true, sir.
She wanted that ride home and you wanted more, isn't that right?
That's not true at all, sir.
And when you finally left the area of Berkeley Road with Nikki's body in the backseat of your car, you took a right on the GV, correct?
If you say so, I don't recall. I'm not familiar with the areas. I don't know which way we definitely went, for sure.
So you went back out of that subdivision the way you came in, right?
I believe so.
And the first intersection is a roundabout.
I don't know.
To the left is where you came from,
I don't know.
with businesses and lights and school.
Sir, I don't know the area, so I'm not sure.
Well, were you looking around when you were driving? When you left?
I don't recall. I know that I was completely stressed out trying to figure out what was going on, trying to take everything in that's happening. I don't recall what was around me, to be completely honest, sir.
Sure. Trying to find the first place to put a body.
Excuse me, sir? I didn't understand
Find
that.
the first good place to put a body.
No, sir.
You pass a rural area on the left that doesn't have trees. You take the first left. You drive up the road until the first spot where both sides of the road are clear. And you drive through a path and put the body in the woods.
Are you asking me a question or making a statement?
I'm asking you a question.
No, sir, that's not what happened.
Well, that is what happened. You're just saying someone else told you to do it.
I don't know the exact directions, sir, so if that's what you say happened, that might be the directions, but I'm not sure.
When Nikki was in the backseat of the car having sex with you, her clothes were totally off?
If I remember correctly, yes, sir.
Her underwear were off?
I believe so. I don't remember them being in the way. No, sir.
Her pants were off?
I believe they were, sir. Yes, sir. But I'm not 100% sure. I can't say definitely they were completely 100% off.
And at the time when you pushed Doug Dietrich, you said he was only 5 or 6 feet away from you?
I said I wasn't sure exactly how far he was.
I think you said 5 or 6 feet, didn't you?
Roughly, I said I wasn't sure. 5 or 6 feet roughly was what I said because I wasn't sure exactly.
But all the rest of the times, he had maintained almost a tactical safe distance from you, right?
I believe so, sir. I don't know what a tactical distance would be.
You described it as he moved when you moved, and he was always keeping himself 10 feet away from you at least.
That's 7 to 10 feet. Yes, sir.
Except at this opportune moment that you took to shove him and get away. Is that right? That was the only time he got to within 5 feet of you?
Like I said before, I wasn't sure if it was exactly 5 feet. I know that I had to lunge and jump at him to get to him. It wasn't where I could just take a step and get to him. And I can roughly step about 4 feet in one step.
When you got back home to your residence that night, you took a shower?
Early morning, yes, sir.
About 4 in the morning on the 21st, you took a shower when you got
I guess roughly that's what time it was. I'm not for sure.
Because you had Nikki's blood all over you.
Where I carried her, yes, sir.
You washed your clothes, correct?
Eventually, yes, sir.
Because your clothes had Nikki's blood on them. Your clothes had Nikki's blood on them at that time?
Yes, sir. I believe that was her blood.
You remember the DNA chart, correct? All the locations on the body where your DNA was found?
I believe so, roughly. I couldn't speculate where everyone was, but I remember roughly, yes, sir.
And you knew from within 48 hours of your arrest that your DNA was found on all those locations on her body?
I personally was known. I don't believe so, but I'm not sure exactly when it was. I don't know exactly where all the points were. I didn't get my discovery until much later.
Your version of the events, you're assaulted, you're held at gunpoint, you carried the mangled body of a woman to her final resting place, and the next day you're going fishing with your buddy with a smile on your face and not a care in the world.
It was a pre-planned event, sir, and I wouldn't say not a care in the world. That would not be something I would say.
No further questions.
Thank you, redirect.
Just one moment, please, Judge.
Whatever you need. Go ahead.
The end of cross-examination there in the George Burch first-degree intentional homicide case out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. The prosecutor trying to wedge in the prosecutor's version of events, and we were talking about that, Adam. Do you think that he got any traction? Because now it's the defense's chance to kind of clean things up a bit.
Well, I mean, he delved into so many areas, so I don't know how far the defense is going to go on redirect. The prosecutor, of course, is supposed to tell a story. I think he did, but I think he did in kind of a not a very labored chronological way. It was a little frustrating to me how he's hitting on one point, then he hits at something at the end of the incident. Really, to be successful, it should have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The order of the way things had occurred, and that would have been much better.
Adam, we're going to go back because the judge is back on the stand or back speaking. Okay, and of course the judge calling for a break here. Normally they wrap up at about this time,
right.
But you know, this might run later. They might want to keep this guy on the stand just to prevent this from pushing into another day with the defendant himself sitting up there on the stand. So to finish your point, you were concerned that this cross-examination was a bit disjunctive.
It really was. I thought the prosecutor was very good in certain areas, but as far as jumping all over the place, that's what he did. I don't know if it was a result of his frustration as to the way the defendant was responding to his questions, but he should have known. Of course, it's going to be a witness that's not going to be cooperative with the prosecution. They have their own story that they're supposed to tell. The bottom line is he went fishing the next day. He took a shower. He got rid of some items that would have had some evidence that could have been exculpatory for him. Why didn't he say anything to the police? Just sort of stick to those main points. Don't get caught up into the details. I think that's what the prosecutor did here, and I don't know how much that's going to help him. But, of course, if I'm a juror and I'm hearing all these things with respect to the fishing trip the next day, and his response is, well, it was pre-planned. I mean, who the hell is this? Sorry, I apologize for my language. Who is this defendant? Is he really to be believed? It's going to go to the jury. I think they're going to finish today. I think the defense attorney's only going to have a few questions to ask on redirect. I mean, what can he really ask? And then the jury's going to make a decision about this very odd, confused story about how a defendant was able to tackle or push a person who had a weapon, didn't hear anything, has no injuries to support, him being unconscious and not witnessing a murder. It's sort of all over the place. Will there be a hanging juror is the question. Can they get a straight guilty across the board? I don't know. It's a weird story. I think the prosecutor failed, though, in not presenting it in a more ordered way. And those are my closing thoughts.
I agree that there were issues with this, and I was always taught that when you're on cross-examination, you have to wear the white hat, meaning that you are an advocate for the truth. And I felt that this was combative almost unnecessarily, but perhaps other people would disagree with me. A couple of other points here that a few people have picked up on. One of them, David Eisbrook, who's one of our guests from time to time here on the Law and Crime Network. He's watching this and it just sent me a message, and I don't think he'll mind me injecting his thoughts into this because I had a similar one, but at a different point here. At one point, the one that I picked up on was the defendant said that he hadn't been in a situation like this before. And I could read the astonishment in the prosecutor's voice. He said, well, you haven't? And the defendant said, I've never been in a situation where I've had a man holding me at gunpoint, instructing me to do certain things. Now, that was one of the most dangerous situations here because it almost opened the door up for an impeachment question about this particular defendant being tried for murder before and acquitted. He was acquitted. It can't come in as a matter of character evidence, but it almost came in on impeachment. David Eisbrook noticed a point where there could have been a similar dangerous situation. The one he picked up on was the defendant saying, I have no knowledge of weapons. Well, what about the other murder case where you were a defendant?
I kind of expected at that point, I think we both had a similar reaction. I thought there would have been a sidebar saying, well, Judge, can you permit me to do anything here? I think that's certainly what I would have done.
And one of those sidebars may have been such a reaction. The jury may be coming back into the courtroom, so we may have to cut things off quickly. But, you know, look, okay. I mean, one of those sidebars could very well have been on these issues.
Sure. I mean, you know, what could be more damaging to a person's credibility than explaining away an acquittal that they had 20 years ago for murder? Just unbelievable. I'm sure the defense attorney's heart skipped a beat. Such a strange thing. I'm surprised that, you know, again, I don't know what was the issue with the prosecutor, why he wasn't more ordered, and why that wasn't something that he had requested a sidebar on. I absolutely agree with the frequent guest of Law and Crime, his point to you, rightfully said.
Yeah, I think that everybody's watching this, it seems, and I think that collectively we're all spotting the things that really bothered us about it. You know, so no redirect of the defendant, so he is off the stand at this point. They are wrapping up for the day, sending the jury home. They may be doing motions to dismiss now. We can't stream anything at the judge's order outside the presence of the jury in this case. So if it is a motion hearing or an evidence hearing or something like that, even though it's open court, we can discuss it, we can report on it. We can't stream it. The judge trying to limit in case any juror is out there, you know, watching what they shouldn't, then they wouldn't be able to see it. But bottom line, that's where things sit right now. So my understanding is that we're going to wrap up for the day here on Law and Crime. But boy, closing arguments tomorrow here in the case. This is going to give both sides some time to digest some of this testimony and figure out how they want to characterize it.
It will, and I can't imagine what's on the mind of the prosecutor right now with the failure to go to the sidebar. There are so many issues. I doubt they'll want to discuss them today. They'll probably want to go back to the office, take a little break from the trial, of course, and figure out how they're going to handle these matters tomorrow. You know, of course, you know, some prosecutors might say, well, wait a second. Can I get a chance to bring the defendant back on based on what he said with respect to the prior incidents? That's an issue that's going to come up. I'm really curious to see. I don't know what things the judge is going to allow and not allow. Of course, you know, time is an issue, and they try to handle these matters as quickly and as efficiently as they can. So maybe too little, too late from the prosecutor, and it's just going to go to closing argument. I don't think that the judge is going to be dismissing the case against the defendant, but I'm sure that these arguments they're going to make in closing, they're going to be interesting and they're going to be compelling.
We are bracing for closing arguments in this case tomorrow, Adam. We are hearing that there may be a potential out-of-town witness for the defense, so the defendant himself might not be the final defense witness. We're also hearing that there may be a brief rebuttal witness for the state. Part of me is wondering if potentially what we could have here is some testimony about somebody being knocked out and what that would look like, how long it could last, how harsh of a blow it would have to be to knock somebody out, whether or not they would have recurring pain, something like that, because that's kind of one of the unknown questions floating out there.
Sure, that'd be interesting to me, but I would assume that they should have handled that not on rebuttal, but just in their case in chief.
Well, it would be the defense case in chief. The defense still has the case. The defense hasn't rested. The prosecution may call, so it may be one more defense witness, and then it may be one prosecution rebuttal. I'm sorry if I was confusing there.
No. I understand that, but I think that should have been presented as part of the state's case initially. That's sort of how I would view that. That should have been part of the beginning, not part of the state's rebuttal after the defense rests. I am curious. And I just really want to know what's going to happen, what kind of ruling the judge would make with respect to any impeachment regarding the acquittal 20 years ago. That's what's interesting to me.
Yeah, well, that's that acquittal 20 years ago has not come into this case. We know about it. The jury presumably doesn't, at least as long as the jurors aren't out there looking for information about this case on the internet. So we will leave things for there. Adam Sostrin, thanks for staying here late with us on Law and Crime. It's always good to have a discussion with you.
Okay, you too. Have a good night.
We're going to wrap up the broadcast today here on Law and Crime with a reminder we are on the air at least from 9 a.m. until at least 5 p.m. Eastern Time with live gavel-to-gavel coverage of cases. We are bracing for closing arguments in the George Burch case tomorrow here on Law and Crime. For now, this is Aaron Keller. Have a good evening, everyone.